How are you, Gerard?
These categories are bursting. They're bursting so much we continually are shuffling them around to see what we might get in.
Yeah, I've changed a few things around. The Buck Stops was initially going to be around the players at the Ashcrofts, and I thought that was amazing. A great way to finish the round. The fact that they were vying for their dad's medal by the end of the game, and Will prevailed. And it was interesting the interview after, trying to get a little bit out of him about the way that the Suns were into him about not deserving the Norm Smith. He didn't really give a lot, but he backed it up with action instead.
He walked away with another medal, all right. So the Buck Stops for Victoria Police made for more search police careers. How wide-reaching are you going to be?
Well, it's a little bit of folly when you look at the ladder and you're making long-term predictions, but I'm sort of looking at the ladder and I'm thinking there's the haves and the have-nots in terms of the way the game is played and what the season or modern-day football is asking for. And I think it's clear enough to say that the top 7 teams in Brisbane, Collingwood, Hawthorn, Gold Coast, Adelaide, Dogs and Geelong are playing winning modern football. They have elements, a combination of transition and contest, a combination of offence and defence, some real run and go off the back, small forward groups that can hunt and pressure, help to defend, but then hunt and pressure in their forward 50. I think they're clear. The percentages would suggest that. All of those are sort of 114 is actually the lowest out of those percentages in Brisbane at the top, up to 140 of the Gold Coast. I've kept GWS is sitting in 8th at the moment, but I think that they're a watch. Like, some of their football has been questionable. They're just exposing themselves to so much field position against. So I've got the top 7 pretty much locked. And I think that the 8 spot's up for grabs, and to an extent, GWS, Fremantle. I mean, I don't mind what Sydney are doing. Melbourne are coming back a little bit. Essendon should be 8th on an adjusted ladder. They've only lost 3 of their 7 games, which, GWS and Fremantle have lost 4 of their 8 games. So I think there's a really clear delineation between the top 7 and the rest, to me, when I look at the ladder. Not just in terms of where they sit on the ladder, but in the way that the game is being played and the challenge that they are asking of their opposition consistently. I think there's a real gap after 7th spot on the ladder at the moment.
All right, so a stirring endorsement for Brisbane, Collingwood, Hawthorn, Gold Coast, Adelaide, the Western Bulldogs and Geelong. The Buck Stops, looking for a career that gives you more. Search police careers. Victoria Police made for more. The big issue is everything that was wrapped in to the Geelong Collingwood Classic. You're in the stands for this?
Yeah, I just went along with a mate and watched Borwin go and win their first game of the season. Sando is on the board, so he'll be a bit happier this week. Did he talk about he gave his team a cook last week?
He went deep.
So like Ross Lyon, they responded. Watch that one and then headed in to watch the game on Saturday night, just as an observer. No work to do, just sit back in the Collingwood past players area amongst the members, and they were a little bit vocal towards the end of the game. That was fair to say, that you were drawn up in the emotion of the umpiring decisions, and geez, it felt like a final. It was the last, I think about 10 minutes in the last quarter, I thought, wow, there is just not an easy ball to be had here. This is like the last quarter of a qualifying final or a prelim final. It's tight, it's hard, it's high quality. You can't afford to fumble. You can't afford to be lapse in your tackling techniques. A slip of a hand above the shoulder was going to be a shot at goal, and I thought both teams were brilliant in it. I was very impressed with Geelong and how they set the game up. I thought they were able to impose the way they wanted the game to be played on Collingwood, which was interesting given that Collingwood have just controlled games in the last month against their opposition increasingly. But neither team lost any credits in my mind, and it was just, it was a fascinating outcome that you sort of enunciated for us at the beginning, and I think it really should consume the analysis of the weekend more so than any other game.
So let's go to moments and then we'll come back to tactics. So just at the end, when the ball is in Jack Crisp's hands and the siren has sounded, so you're a pragmatist, I reckon. but you'd have been a bit misty-eyed in prospect of that moment, wouldn't you?
I loved it. I turned around to my mate and I said, he's a 6 out of 10 from here. He'll get the distance, but it's a 6 out of 10. You just can't switch off a coach, can you? I'm saying, just go back an extra 5 metres crispy, take 2 steps to the right so you don't run off your line, and turn it into a running shot at goal. You're not going to bounce it, but take your full 15 and turn it into a running shot at goal. And he pretty much did that, but because he didn't have quite as much momentum, and you're at the end of the game, and you're fatigued, and you've got all of this. I mean, he's at the end of 245 games non-stop, so he's carried a fair bit of a load. But look, it was he texted me on Sunday morning actually to say to recognise, I suppose our part of the journey together and to thank me. And I just thought, mate, the credit's all yours. And he's been amazing with the way he's gone about it. And I thought the way that he and his teammates responded to it after, and we've seen it. Like you just played the edit of Craig McRae talking about being winners, and I thought it was everything that's great in the game, wasn't it?
It was beautiful.
And I think
spontaneous.
Agreed. And bar some of the reactions in some of the umpiring concerns, or not so much the umpiring concerns, because I think that happens. That's part of the game. And I think that the catharsis that happens when you go and watch footy and you're venting, I think that's part of it as well. But that's what I felt in the stands as well. Like we had some Collingwood people that were up and were out when we were almost 3 goals down. They missed the riveting last 4 or 5 minutes of footy.
They should have known better by now.
Because the toys were out of the cot. But it was they should know better. But it was absolutely engrossing, wasn't it? And it was never done. Really proud of the Collingwood players. It was still an emotional connection there. But a fascinating game, and just loved the way Geelong went about it. The coaching, the strategy, to not allow Collingwood their defence to settle, to not look sideways in their back half. They were prepared. They were going to go down the line and take as much ground as they possibly could against Collingwood, whether it was with short kicks, whether it was with run and carry, or more often with long kicks, and then speed up off that and get them over the back. And they probably could have scored heavier in the first quarter, but then Collingwood arrested control. I was really surprised that Collingwood went back at Geelong as hard as they went at them. So it made it a really an engrossing contest of back and forth in that transition game, fed into Geelong's want for high transition, but then the last quarter just flipped. It was entirely different.
The Dangerfield role in that?
Yeah, look, the contested ball was what shifted. And I think Geelong imposed that. They got field position early. They forced Collingwood on their back foot, D50. Collingwood had to lay 14 tackle attempts. They had to lay 10 tackles in their D50 when they were holding up before Geelong got a couple of goals, before Dangerfield broke some tackles and either kicked a goal or put a teammate into space. And it was a great challenge by Geelong to test Collingwood, and they stood up for the most part. But Dangerfield was huge. To have 13 touches, only 3 kicks, 10 handballs, but then to kick the goal. He had some key moments. But Geelong forced the game into contest. They're actually, looking back at the numbers, as a percentage of their total possessions, Geelong have a higher percentage of contested possessions than any other team. So they're creating a game style, even though they've got this frenetic up and back and they want the game in open and they don't value clearance as much. They love the contest. And they were able to impose that on Collingwood. So there was no time and space. Nick Dacos couldn't get away, 3 touches in the last quarter, not because he was tagged heavily, but because there was so much congestion around the ball, which took him away from his one wood, and it brought it into Dangerfield's. So I think that was fascinating. And Collingwood were, as you're talking about, they had 64 uncontested possessions each quarter, up to 3/4 time. So almost 200 uncontested possessions. They only had 34 in the last. So the game was totally flipped. And Collingwood still stood up, but Geelong were able to impose that style, which for mine is a finals style. Like
Yep.
you love the open play. You love to be able to score and move it end to end. You need to be able to defend that as well. But when the whips are cracking at the end of the year and through September in the big games, who can knuckle down? Who can win those in close contests? Who's going to be the gladiators that are strong enough to make something out of nothing like a Dangerfield? And if your team hasn't got those and can't withstand that sort of pressure, you're not going to be able to beat the best teams when it matters.
So Fizz text through, qualifying final Cats Pies 2022 is one of the most exhilarating and tight contests I've ever witnessed with zero space. Saturday wasn't that, but it was close. And what a battle between two great sides. That was my reference point too, Fizz. As I was watching it, I was transported back to that qualifying final. And
Jason, I left for God's sake, still kicking myself.
Oh, how could you leave?
Jason might have been the one. There was a Collingwood fella who left, and there must have been like a can on. Like I was about 3 rows in from the back. And he took off and he goes, "That's what happens when you ring Laura Kane during the week. You get a response," like talking about Chris Scott. And he kicked a can and he was off. This was with 5 minutes to go. I was like, he's not happy.
Just let's tick off what do you think of the Bobby Hill rundown tackle?
I was behind it and you could see Manna's not slow. Like, I was behind it and I thought that's a bit low. It slipped down. Like he might have been up on the hips, but it did slip down. So I thought on to the eye, I thought that's a great chase, but he hasn't executed the tackle well enough. So I thought it was going to be called as a leg and picked that up pretty quickly. But because everyone gets caught up in that was a brilliant chase and he got him before he disposed of the ball, we forget about executing the skill. And Bobby, I think there was a response in that to maybe the Paul Curtis stuff. When you're tackling from behind now, there's no doubt players will be really cautious about how they do it. I thought he could have taken another step, but geez, it was a great effort. And the crowd went nuts. We've got him, we're going to go back the other way. But the call had already been made and there was a bit of confusion around it, and that just adds to the drama. But I thought that was the right call, and I think in replay you can see that it was the right call.
And the score review.
Yeah, that wasn't the right call, was it?
So I'm challenged by what we are prepared to accept as definitive evidence, because the camera in the post gave a shot that had the ball separate to Blitzarv's hands.
And the Arc is using that one?
Yes. And then I think they confused themselves with multiple other angles which told them nothing. So we use blurred vision to establish certainty. This was a crisp shot. The problem is, and this is why I don't believe in it. The problem is if Blitzarves actually did touch it. So if we take him at face value that he did touch it, then the camera didn't show that. So we slavishly devote ourselves towards an image which is not representative of the 3D world and then impose that. I feel like in the way these things are typically done, that shot from the post would have been done to say the ball is clear of Blitzarv's hands at all times. There's a gap.
There was a definitive enough. There was conclusive proof.
Yeah. So when do we apply that and when do we not
and
apply
at the
that?
ground,
That's my question.
At the ground, you can't know this.
No.
Like the broadcast, like sitting at home gives you a far greater look at the score review system than sitting at the ground. And I don't mind that. Like it's become a sport. Like the score review has become a sport, and we are looking at. We're getting more right. There's no doubt the score review is changing. We're taking some of the howlers out. Well, maybe.
Yes. No, we are.
We're taking some of the howlers out, and we're making better decisions because of it. So it has improved the decision making of the umpires. Even though sometimes we go to it too often, just to make sure, but it's still not perfect. Are we going to get a perfect system?
When the chip is in the ball, if that technology crosses the threshold, you'll be able to say something touched the ball, and then you'll be able to triangulate the vision to say the only thing that could have touched the ball was Blitzarv's hand, or nothing touched the ball. And you'll be able to triangulate that to say it was a goal. So that's the only way it will take the next step. I do think the search for the touch is folly. I wouldn't do that. But then when you apply it and when you don't, is the question of what happened in that moment. You were there, Bucks. It was beautifully done.
Yeah, it was. It was done really well, and Crawford's the master of ceremonies, and just the faces and the champions, the stars, the established legends of the game, not just for Hawthorn, but of the game in its entirety. And it was a fantastic celebration. It's relatively young club at 100 years in the AFL, but have had tremendous success, and to see the eras represented. And I thought that vision of Sam Mitchell pulling the has-beens, the guys that have been there and done that and have atop the mountain time and time again, to pull them in around the young chargers and to deliver that final message. And he held them for a little while, like it was a couple of minutes. And I'm sure that Dipper would have loved it. They'll be talking about it, over a few beers for the next couple of months, and they'd love to see this team, and this young group go on and reprise, their deeds. But I just thought that Sam Mitchell's—he's just the perfect bloke at the perfect time to be, carrying the history of the club and the future of the club at the same time. And the fact that Alistair Clarkson was there, you put down your weapons, and everything's forgotten and forgiven, and you remember the good moments. I thought that was a great, I suppose, visual representation of what the day was, and Hawthorn did it brilliantly. I would have loved to have seen it at night, the fireworks after, just a little thing. I was sitting there with Tom Hawkins before, we're about to call the game, and thought, geez, how much would it have been, 5 or 10% better if it was at night? Because the Dogs one was done really well also, only a month back. But no, couldn't question it. It was brilliant, and then the team followed through.
Yeah, so from what Sicily said, Mitchell went with what these guys wouldn't give to pull on the brown and gold one more time. That's it. That's it.
It is.
God, it was a good,
It is, and I think it's a legacy. It's legacy moments as well. It's to acknowledge that, hey, they're where you want to be. In decades' time, you want to be out when you've done all your work and you've put all your energy in and you've sacrificed this, that, and the other, and invested to go and be great at what you do in the prime of your careers, right here, right now.
Yep.
Wouldn't you love to be circling around a Hawthorn team in 30 years' time and having that current day coach talking about what it would be like to, it's the circle of life, and Hawthorn have done it so well over so long. And I just spoke to, I sent a message to Jordan Lewis. I said, great acknowledgement, well done. I'm sure it felt awesome to reflect on you and your team's contributions to the club. He said, how good is it seeing faces you haven't seen in a long while? It was great to reconnect. And as much as winning a flag and the memories of that is great, I think it gives you an excuse to come back together and to celebrate the sacrifices and the investment that you made together. So all credit to them.
And then Jack Gunston kicked his 500th goal just to put an extra moment into the day.
Yeah, and look, hasn't he been? He's been huge. I mean, that was great, and you could see that the players were up and about with that. I just looking at his numbers, I went back to the last month, and then you go back even further. So he didn't come back. He didn't come into the side until round 3. So in his time back in the game, in the 5 weeks that he's played, no one's kicked more goals. So he's kicked 18 goals, 8. Ben King's kicked 18. Hogan's kicked 18. Taylor Walker 15. Higgins 15. Thilthorpe 14. There's some pretty big names there. So Jack Gunston is in amongst it, in right here and now. But he's had 8 direct score assists. The others have had 3s and 2s and 1s. His scoreboard impact is elite for the time that he has been back up at the top level and plying his trade. And Hawthorn have gone 3-2 in that time. It's not as if they've won every game. But it's fascinating to see him reprise his craft in front of the ball, because he's been as good as anyone in his time, and he's playing really good footy right now.
The best bit, Hawthorn centenary celebrations. The worst bits, Carlton blew up our polyannering. God, that was a disappointing performance.
Well, I don't know if they blew it up, but you know what polyannering is? Polyannering is seeing the positives when there are few. When there are so many reasons why the negatives should take should take the stage and should be the focus of it. Polyannering is supposedly looking past those to see the possibility. And They did it. They did it for a couple of weeks. But what they showed is the soft underbelly that's there at the moment. And Adelaide is still a side that's trying to prove themselves. Their best football is really good Adelaide. They did the same thing to Carlton 2 years ago, the first gather-round game. Was it 2 years ago? Yep. First gather-round game. Kicked 8 goals on them in the first quarter, 8-1. And they were just too slick, too clean inside, too fast to get from the inside to the outside. Carlton couldn't stop them doing that. And when Carlton won the ball, they were, Adelaide their pressure was on. So I thought that, it sort of went the way you expected it to. Adelaide are a modern day side on the up, playing modern football. Carlton are an old school side that are trying to hold on with some great some great characteristics, some great players that play, some hard, tough footy inside. But the modern game is asking for more than just that, and they haven't got all their elements in play at the moment. They're dour and they defend really well when they have to, but they haven't been able to find a way to finish well enough to access their quite obvious strengths in front of the ball, and they're not consistent enough either. So they were exposed.
Got smacked around the ball. So they've been smacked around the ball twice this year, as the Collingwood game and the Adelaide game. And Michael Voss has that neat saying, "That's not us." But unfortunately, they do have that in them. It's not them every week, but they do have that in them. And when they do, they're hapless. They don't. No other phase of their game can save them from getting smacked around the ball.
But that's true of everyone. It's true of every team. But it seems that some teams are more reliant on it than others, and Carlton are one of those teams. They are so reliant on winning contests and clearance. It gives their defenders just a bit of breathing space because they're not that great at defending. Like if the ball is coming down fast, out of stoppage or in transition, and this goes for all defences, but the back sixes would much prefer to have territory and clearance going that way so that they can play on the front foot. As soon as it comes the other way, it seems to me that Carlton break down quicker than most. I don't think they've got there's a dearth of players that are in front of the ball for Carlton that are prepared to do the hard yards to get back to support that defence. And they don't really have great legs out of their midfield running back the other way. So they're the things that were exposed, and they're a constant work in progress. There is an improvement that can come from them, and they've shown what their best football can look like. I don't know whether it's going to stack up against the very best teams and the very best football, and Adelaide looked like both of those on the weekend.
And Buckley's chance, as we were all looking forward to the Q Clash last night to get a measure, and the Suns didn't measure up. Brisbane were all too powerful in the midfield, and the second and third quarters was a pretty substantial demonstration of superiority.
Well, riddle us this. Gold Coast have only lost 2 games to the reigning premiers and the reigning wooden spooners. So and then they've done pretty well apart from that. I think Damien Hardwick was really clear in his post-match presser. We didn't win. We didn't win around the ball. We got out-grunted, and that's 2 weeks in a row. So Brisbane did it to St Kilda, and they've done it to the Suns after their defeat to Collingwood, and it became a real focus for them. And that's we shouldn't we don't back announce very often, but your worst losses, the times that you've fallen short, can actually inform where you need to put your energy to become the next best version of yourself. So we saw it with the Lions this time last year when they got flogged by the Giants. Fags has gone, I don't know if the players are listening to me anymore. We need to have this chat. It's a come to Jesus moment, and they have to work out where they're going to go from here. They go on and win a flag. Fremantle might be in that situation. We'll get to them. But when you have a loss, it's not fatal. When you have a bad loss, it's not fatal. It's what you do from that. And the Lions have looked really good over the last couple of weeks to go plus 19 in clearance and plus 22 in contested ball against a midfield that we think has the goods and has the type of players that should be competing in that area. That's a pretty strong performance from a Brisbane midfield that are supposed to be happy with themselves, aren't they? Yeah, supposed to have that premiership glow or the post-premiership hangover, but we're not seeing it. They're still up for the fight.
Yeah, no, they are reinvented by the Ashcrofts together. So their parts are well revealed. But with those two extra pieces, they're
just the 63 touches between them.
So I know there's a lot of talk around this midfield. There's no one has more depth in this midfield. The only true state, nobody has the depth through the middle like the Lions. Not with the two Ashcrofts adding into what they've got.
Well,
that is.
I reckon the dogs might be thereabouts, and we'll get to them as well. But I thought, and Charlie Cameron coming back into the mix, like he went 3 games goalless, which was foreign territory for him. So he's been idling. Yeah, he's a V8 that's been going on 3 cylinders. Yeah. So to get him back and heading the right way would be an enormous fillip for them. They're still not at their best, which is scary.
Fremantle and Justin Longmuir after the events of Friday night. We sat together and listened to that press conference. Bucks is not sure we're up for the fight. You can't be that team. That's as come to Jesus moments are. That's a big one.
Yeah, and on reflection with further time, I mean, he said exactly what we saw. He felt exactly what we feel, and that is that they can't be that team and they can't be as inconsistent as they have been. You know, they've had really poor performances against Geelong, Melbourne, and now this week against St Kilda. They've been okay in the others. They've been able to win 4 of their other 5 games. They sit at 4-4, and that's middling compared to the expectations on them. They're under 100%, and they. More to the point, they just got absolutely smashed by a side who we don't believe, is not widely speculated to be a top 8 quality side to go, at the completion of 2025. Although the Saints did beat the Cats on the same field, but they were well beaten by Brisbane the week before. To win clearance to lose clearance by 28, if you're looking at from the Freo perspective, and to be minus 48 in contested ball, like that speaks to more than system, it speaks to more than personnel, it speaks to attitude, and it speaks to effort. So that's the first conversation you need to have. You can't judge a system, a way of moving the ball, a way of defending, if you can't bring the necessary attitude and effort. And that is a coaching responsibility and it is a coaching challenge, but it is something that Justin will speak with his playing group about. He'll speak with his coaches about, and he takes responsibility to a fault when he puts himself out there like that. Of course, I question myself, and like that can be read plenty of ways. But knowing the guy, that means that I'm putting my hand up to take accountability for anything that happens here, good, bad, and indifferent, and I need to be responsible for it. And we'll go finding out why and how this has come about. I'll self-reflect and we'll work with the coaches and we'll work with the leaders, and then we'll see what can come out of it. But the next month is instructive for the Dockers.
So they had the poor performance. They got the emotional cue, stopped training, big response at home, and then lapse back on the road. So if I was hazarding a guess, I would say this is the most difficult phase when you're a coach. So you can produce the special effort, but it's only a special effort.
Well, and that's a short term. That is we're looking at the last 2 weeks, and the first 3 weeks against Adelaide were great. The last quarter, and Brownie rightfully said, sort of asked the rhetorical question: do you believe in how you finish the last game is how you start the next? And there is an element of that. I mean, there's a couple of training sessions in between, but the amount of time that you spend in preparation on the track, connecting as a unit, maybe doing some handball drills, etc., some full ground stuff, it's actually minimal. You're protecting the players. You're giving them a chance to recover. So it's more a mental and emotional game to be able to back up, because you've already done the work, and now it's about it's strategy. What are our key focuses, and what's our purpose and reason for going and finding this elite level of competitiveness that we need to be able to execute our game style. They weren't able to find it. So maybe the last quarter against Adelaide was a window into that they can't raise the fight. The purpose that they have is not strong enough at this stage for them to come together as a group. And there just weren't enough players that were prepared to empty themselves out on the weekend. Like the game, it was like and I speak about this, it's like St Kilda were behind Fremantle, had them in a headlock, and were just lowering them to the ground. There was no fight. There was no pushback, bar a couple of minutes at the beginning of the third quarter when there was a couple of bit of movement through stoppage. There was nothing. That's the most worrying sign that I would have. And you have a chat at quarter time, half time, 3/4 time. There was vision in the rooms after with the Fremantle players getting around their family and it looked okay. Like there weren't head in hands type stuff, but there would have to be some shell shock from that performance across the whole club. So there's going to be some hard conversations take place today, and the trip home wouldn't have been much fun.
No.
And it's a quick turnaround to Thursday night, and yeah, they've probably got some advantages. Collingwood off a 5-day break on their home deck, been smacked. The papers over in WA will be going pretty hard. Yeah, we should get a fight back, a bounce back, but even that won't be instructive. It'll be more than 1 week. It's the next 4 to 6 weeks. What does it look like? What does your moderate, even average performance look like in that period? And then you can gauge sort of what the Dockers are capable of.
Is this the biggest phase of Longmuir's tenure at Fremantle?
Yes. Well, every phase is. If to understand, there's the pressure index and the focus and on tenure comes and goes at different times. Or if we look across, I don't mean to divert, but Chris Fagan, it was on him early last year. Fly hasn't had it. Mitchell hasn't had it. Hardwick hasn't had it. Nix has definitely had it. I'm going down the ladder at the moment. Bevo has definitely had it. Chris Scott, not so much. At different times in a career, you will find yourself in this position. So whether Justin's tenure continues at the Dockers or not, and how long and how solid it is, will depend on the next batch of performances. So this next 4 to 6 weeks becomes instructive. It's not as if he's been there for 1 or 2 seasons. He's actually had a consolidated amount of time. They'll have an assessment on where they think their list is at, what tools they think that he has, and he and his coaching staff has at his disposal. And there'll be a fair bit. There'll more than a fair bit. There's a lot riding on, the next 4 to 6 weeks, and this is where you either make it or break it.
I've broken one of our means test rules, and for the second week running, we've got the Dogs in preliminary final integrity. They've found the magic.
We've just got meaner and testier with the Dogs, so they are compelling. They are absolutely compelling, and this happened off Broadway, off the radar, and in their otherwise home ground up at Mars Stadium, and they're just squeezing sides. I think if you're talking about a consistency of application to task, you can just see a side that are prepared to play their role, bring high energy and investment into the way they want to go about it. There's no time and space when you play the Dogs, and yet when they get the ball, you can't get it back off them. Their defenders are running hard. Their young players are standing up. Everything's efficient. Everything's in shape. It seems like the left hand knows what the right hand's doing, and when you get that, it doesn't really matter what the makeup of your 23 is. It's easier to play the game, and so they're in a real sweet spot. They're the opposite of the Dockers that we just focused on. Like everything's coming easy to them because easy, hard, easy. They've done the work and they've done it hard, and now it looks easy for them. If you take it easy in the short term, then maybe it gets hard later. And so I think Bevo's made some hard calls. He needs credit for what he's been able to do with this group. Look at Bailey Smith, the type of football he's playing for Geelong. Jack McRae, the type of football he's playing for St Kilda. Dunkley, and the type of football that he's played consistently for the Brisbane Lions. There's no that Hugo Hagen that's not in the side and may never be. Darcy, who's not there. Liam Jones, who's been moved aside, and others have come in. So it's not as if they've sat on their hands. This is a completely reshuffled, rejigged, replumbed, rewired version of the Dogs, and it's compelling. So they're playing as good a footy, as consistent football as anyone, despite not having all of their players available and having a really young side at times to go and get the job done. They smashed Port over 4 quarters, absolutely smashed them.
So Darcy goes out and they post 113 against the Giants and then 131 in tricky conditions against Port Adelaide, which told you everything you needed to know.
Well, they've just dominate field position. There used to be a knock on the Dogs about they do the back 2/3 really well. They're great in the contest, but they can't finish. They don't go when they go inside 50. They're just not as damaging enough. They're not as dangerous enough. Well, have a look at them now. Like they're scoring heavily. They're playing the modern game the way it needs to be played. They're run off the back. It's not just Bailey Dale. Johannesson's up and about now. Cleary has a crack. Williams is involved in that run and carry. They're midfield. Richards, who was on the halfback line, now a midfielder. Fraser, who was on the halfback line, now a midfielder. Bontempelli's there. Libera's doing what he's doing. Trelaw comes in, he's reintroduced. Harms, Kennedy, keep going. Riley West is, try getting a kick on him when he's playing his role forward of the ball for them. Norton's up and about and has always competed, but sometimes being a big fella in front of the ball is the hardest job in the game. There is no harder role to play than being a tall forward that has to compete aerially against an outnumber continually. And he's just kept at it. And that's the reason why he was moved from back to forward and Bevo's stuck with that the whole way. Whether he's kicked goals or not, whether he's looked good or not, it's an important part of their structure and he's stuck with it. And that's, what we're seeing is the fruits of all of the hard decisions. All of the stoicism, maybe the pig-headedness in the right doses, and they're looking great.
The unanswerable question is, does Port have a shorter breaking point than previously? So this is 2 90-point losses in the 8 games they've played. When it turned against them, they gave up.
Did you see the whole game?
I called it.
Yeah, you called it. Yeah, so I saw the
white flag.
I saw the mini.
Third quarter.
I saw the mini, and I was, obviously talking about the Dogs, sort of seeing them last week and seeing them live. But yeah, Porter, when you become the girl with the curl and your good's very good and your bad's very bad, that's a concern. That it really is. But there was a bit of commentary around, they need to add something in the mix. They need to find some zap and some bite and some. So Rosie's gone behind the ball to try and do that. Moraes, Evans, Berry, Williams at different times, Farrell, they have tried to create, and Farrell's actually having a pretty good year in my estimation. They're looking for that bounce off the back. Darcy Byrne-Jones isn't there anymore because he probably doesn't hit the targets enough, so we'll put him in front of the ball. Lockie Jones, he's there, but we need him to be a competitive, maybe a quasi third tall. Bergman, when he's up and about, does that. They've got some elements, but Ken is still trying to work out how he's going to cobble together this list to find his best mix, and they're coughing and spluttering at times. Their best is compelling, and their midfielders, they've got a lot of weapons. But when they lose field position and when the ball movement from their opposition sort of tests their back six, they still can get exposed. So there's still a bit of work to do. And then we go to tenure and how long you're there for. Look, in the end, season 2025 is going to exist in its own little bubble, and Ken's got to crack at it for a period of time. I don't think it enters the player's psyche until finals are out of the equation or until top four's out of the equation. The motivation can ebb and flow a little. When we get to you don't want to get to the back half of the season and feel like you're just treading water. That would be the worst case scenario for Port, but there's still a lot of time between now and that eventuality or otherwise.
Nathan Buckley, you had Collingwood, Brisbane, Geelong and the Western Bulldogs last week. What would you like to do?
What happens if you don't move?
Yeah, you're allowed to just call stand.
I'm taking a pause. So I've got the Dogs at 4. I think that they've franked their seeding, and I think that they are playing the type of football that can challenge. If they were playing this footy in September, they could win finals. So that's why they're there. I love Geelong's performance. I thought it was huge. Dangerfield keeps going. The way they were able to impose their game style and adjust the game to to their favour was excellent. Brisbane, I think, have come along really well. And I'm keeping Collingwood at 1. Jeremy Howe didn't play. I think it's a little bit about 5-day break. There's a little bit about management for the next week in their selection. Not saying that they were a soft kill because of that, but I think that there's enough reason just to leave them where they are and see how next week pans out.
All right, so you're holding.
Yes. What are you doing?
Hugely reactionary.
Are you?
Yeah, I love being reactionary on the
So you're going to put Geelong to 1?
No, Geelong go back in. They've been in, out for me. They go back in at 4.
Fair weather.
Yeah. I'm slipping Collingwood from 1 to 3 because the Bulldogs were at 3, but I'm putting them up to 2. I'm utterly compelled by what the Bulldogs are doing right now. And Brisbane regained the number 1 seeding. They just walked out and went, nah, little brother, cop this. So I'm happy to have Brisbane 1, Bulldogs 2, Collingwood 3, Geelong 4.
What is it? Flash judgments? What do you call it?
Snap judgments.
Snap judgments.
Yeah.
That's a snap seedings.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hostage to the moment.
You're a fickle man.
Hostage to the moment.